Hello and welcome back to another episode of the For the Property Investor podcast. And we're here with the weekly news. And of course, the man who brings us the news is here as well. Otherwise, we wouldn't be here. And of course, that's Nick Bendel. Hello, Nick.
Hello, Owen. Great to join you as always.
Yes, and it's another sunny Monday, or hopefully it's sunny wherever you are. But it's and you just happen to be somewhere different at the moment. How's
Yes.
your week been, and where are you at the moment?
Well, I'm normally in Sydney, but I'm in Perth for a 2-week working holiday,
Yep.
and the weather has been lovely. Today it's been not cold, but cooler, and there has been a tiny bit of drizzle. I won't call it rain, just a little bit of drizzle, but I'm really enjoying Perth. It's been a while since I've been here. It's a lovely city, and I've also had a good week work-wise. My business, Hunter and Scribe, as you know, we are a copywriting agency. We write content for finance and property businesses throughout Australia, and we got a wonderful 5-star Google review in the past few days. I've been working with Nick Bendel, the Hunter and Scribe, for about 2 years now, and the quality of content has been consistently excellent. Nick has a great knack for taking complex topics in the property and finance sectors and making them engaging for our audience. He is professional, highly reliable, and a vital part of our content strategy.
Yes, of which I completely agree with. So, well done, Nick. It's always nice when you get a 5-star Google review. But yes, even though, and happy Easter to everyone. Even though it's been a short week with Easter, we've had a pretty busy week at Leafield as well, trying to squeeze 5 days into four. Still leasing lots of property, and it's and onboarding new staff coming this week. So lots of exciting things. And of course, we had end of month during the
Mm.
past week as well. So yes, lots happening. And yes, he's up and up to another week, Nick. But Nick, you've brought us the news. Let's get into the first story, yeah?
Let's do it. The first story is property market defies the doom and gloom. Property prices are still rising despite the war in the Middle East and 2 recent rate rises. Cotality reported that the national median price rose 0.7% in March, despite the RBA raising rates on February 4 and March 18, and America attacking Iran on February 28. Over the year to March, the national median price rose 9.9%, and prices rose in all capital cities over that year. Melbourne recorded 3.4% annual growth, Sydney 4.8, Canberra 6.1, Hobart 7.8, Adelaide 11.4, Brisbane 19, Darwin 19.7, and Perth 24.3%. Owen, are you surprised that the national median price rose further in March despite the rate rises and despite the war in the Middle East?
Um, in some ways, no, Nick. It's we have a look at the underlying issue in this country with the property market, and it's still a lack of supply. Um, it's we just need to look at what's happening to petrol prices with the inkling of opportunity of lack of supply,
Mm.
coming into the fuel market. And what happened to prices? They skyrocketed. So people don't seem to understand that this is the same issue with the property market. It's got nothing to do with capital gains tax discounts. It's got nothing to do with uh, negative gearing. It's all to do with the supply of property, or should I say the lack of supply. So, yes.
Perth boomed for a few years, and then last year, I know we discussed it a few times. Perth's growth was slowing significantly. It was still growing, but that growth slowed significantly. But now it's accelerated again. Perth prices increased 7.3% over the quarter, 7.3% over the quarter, and 24.3% over the year. What is going on, Owen? Why is Perth booming again?
Yes, well, it shows that there's still a lot of demand, and I might be jumping the gun here, but wasn't there some kind of first home buyer scheme that came out that was supposedly not going to boost demand, but it just might have. Um, so, I've got an inkling that we might talk about that in a few minutes. But yeah. So we need to look at what's happening here. Yes, the Perth market, because it's still fairly affordable compared to a lot of other areas around the country. But we're still seeing Brisbane with 19%. And Brisbane's been going hot for much longer than Perth has. So to see it still at double digits and high double digits, it's just amazing. It's crazy.
The Perth's booming, Brisbane's booming. By contrast, Sydney prices rose only 4.8% over the year, and they actually fell 0.2% over the quarter. So why is the Sydney market in a bit of a slump?
We'll just look at the price point. It's it's tough to buy in Sydney now. You're looking at with the cost of living, and then you've got wages aren't that much higher in Sydney than they are in other capital cities. And it's of course been growing for a lot longer than some, especially Perth, has been growing year on year for a lot longer than Perth, especially, and Melbourne, and even Brisbane. So it's yeah.
Let's move on to our next story. Housing scheme celebrates milestone. The federal government's 5% deposit scheme, which was launched in January 2020, has now had its 300,000th participant. Of those 300,000 people, half have been under 30, one-fifth have been key workers like teachers, nurses, and emergency services personnel, one-third have been based in the regions, and one-tenth have used the scheme to build new homes. The 5% deposit scheme helps owner-occupiers to buy a property with just a 5% deposit without having to pay LMI. Income caps no longer apply, although there are price caps. So, Owen, you sometimes grumble about this 5% deposit scheme, but given the fact that the scheme has now supported 300,000 people into the market, should we concede that the positives of the scheme actually outweigh the negatives?
Oh, I don't get me wrong. I think it's great for those people who've been able to take advantage of it. But we've got everyone whinging, complaining about prices continually going up, and and then we've got the supply issue, which is making it more difficult for people to be able to get into the market because they're competing with so many of these first home buyers, as well as people. The biggest portion of the market, though, are the upgraders, or someone selling their current home and moving to another one. So it's we're in a position where prices are still going to go up, and this has just fueled demand more. So I'm all for any scheme that helps anyone get into their first home. But when we've got people whinging and complaining about prices continually going up, and the government is funding these schemes that are fueling demand and pushing prices up even further, um, they're just throwing fuel on the fire.
Okay, so pros and cons for the 5% deposit scheme, and perhaps the cons outweigh the pros. Is that a fair summary of your position?
At this point in time, yes. I mean, if we had enough supply meeting the demand, where prices were remaining neutral, or at least just and neutral in terms of growing at CPI, um, and then yeah, there wouldn't be a problem at all. Yeah,
But then we
that'd
wouldn't
be
need the
the
scheme.
Well, there wouldn't be demand for the scheme, but the issue is that the demand for the scheme is pushing up prices even further. So we're in this vicious circle of the dog chasing its own tail.
So when we need the scheme, that's when it's actually not suitable, and the only time it's suitable is when we don't need the scheme. This reminds me of Groucho Marx saying he didn't want to join any club that would have him as a member, because obviously that wouldn't be a good club to be part of. Anyway, this does make sense eventually, once you've had a few drinks. Now, speaking of schemes, at the last election, you might recall Peter Dutton promised to allow first-home buyers who purchased a new property, to claim a tax deduction for the interest payments on the first $650,000 of their mortgage for the first 5 years of their mortgage. Would that have been a good policy?
Um, yes, it's well, it's not a bad one, and it saves the government having to actually hand out money. So it just becomes a cash flowing of the issue over time, rather than forking out the grants out up front and so on. So it's that's I mean it's not a bad idea, but it's still going to um, throw fuel on the fire. So it's if we're not fixing the supply issue, then we're all we're doing is throwing candy at the crowd.
Mm, because the two of us work in the industry, and we're very interested in these issues, we understand that the downsides of these schemes often exceed the upsides. The cons often outweigh the pros. I don't know what the average punter thinks. I'd be very curious to know, but governments on both sides of the aisle, at both federal and state level, have been unveiling just a dizzying array of these housing incentives over the years. I'm wondering, are we now at the stage, Owen, where it's become politically impossible for governments to take the sugar off the table? Or do you think that an opposition party actually could win votes by promising voters that it would eliminate these housing incentives because they do more harm than good?
Yeah, no, I don't think any any opposition party would win votes by taking the sugar coated candy off the table. It's what might win votes is a federal government pushing the issue onto state governments to actually um, fix the issue of property taxes properly. We've got bad taxes called stamp duty, which stops people from selling, because if they're downsizing or just wanting to move in terms of area, it's a disincentive to move. So a lot of the time people are better off financially just to stay where they are.
Mm.
And so we need to reform that. Now that's going to mean some kind of ongoing land tax. Now it's been looked at before, it's been studied. The New South Wales government's or the previous Liberal New South Wales government started working towards some kind of test case with first home buyers, but it soon got killed when the current Labor New South Wales state government came into power, which just shows that they had no foresight, no long-term thinking, because really if we want to fix this issue and put a lot more liquidity into the property market, we need to get rid of stamp duty. Now, unfortunately, that's going to mean higher taxes in other areas. And so, yes, I think it's going to take a federal government to work with the states, either in a positive way or in a negative way, by forcing their hand to make it happen. And Yes, that would be the smartest thing, but it's difficult, but probably a difficult thing for politicians to sell to the electorate.
Let's move on to our final story. Vendors experiencing much more pleasure than pain. The latest pain and gain report from Cotality has revealed that 95.9% of people who sold a home in the December 2025 quarter secured a price that was higher than their original purchase price. The regions outperformed the capital cities. 97.6% of regional vendors achieved a profit compared to 94.9% of metro vendors, and houses outperformed units by 98.1% to 91.2%. Interestingly, 2/5 of the unit losses in Australia were concentrated in just 5 local government areas: Melbourne, Parramatta, Sydney, Stonington, and Port Phillip. Oh, and in all the years I've been reading the Pain and Gain report, houses have always outperformed units. Why do houses tend to experience stronger capital growth than units? What's the reason?
It's a bigger market that it appeals to. You've also got a natural way of thinking in terms of the marketplace, where whether it's true or not, it's the perception that creates the reality that houses always outperform units. So in that case, houses will always outperform units because that's the perception. And but as we grow as a country and we grow much larger cities, that it's a smaller market, and with units, and that's generally the reason why.
What about scarcity? Each house tends to be different from the next one, whereas in a block of apartments, each apartment is basically the same. If I'm competing for the house and I don't get the house, there's probably not another one like that. Whereas if I compete for the unit and I don't get the unit, maybe there's 5 other units in the block that are for sale. And if I don't get unit 126, well, I can bid for unit 349 instead. I'm wondering, does that greater scarcity for houses also lead to more capital growth for houses?
To a point, but also you need to look at the land factor. So generally, the building on a property, whether it's an apartment building or a house, it's that depreciates in value, and over time, at some point, you're going to have to put more money into that building to maintain it, or knock it down and rebuild another one. And so it's the land component that you're buying that generally goes up in value. So it's so when you're buying a unit or an apartment, you're buying a bigger portion of something that's going to depreciate in value. So that would be a contributing factor as well, Nick.
Hmm. Cotality found that 2/5 of the unit losses in the country occurred in just 5 LGAs. Do you have any theories as to why the unit market is performing poorly in those specific locations?
Well, going back to our old conversation over and over again that we have of supply and demand, it's if we look at those 5 LGAs, you would see that there's a much higher concentration and volume of units and apartments that have been built there, and generally they've all been built within a shorter space of time. So when they're all being built at once and there's a lot of them, then there's a lot of supply. And when there's not as much demand, then guess what? The price is going to do. So sometimes, and a lot of the time uh, in these unit markets, the prices have even gone backwards in the last 10 years.
Mm.
So if that isn't a wake up call for people who think that all property prices are going up, and they think it's got something to do with anything else other than supply and demand, then yes, maybe they should look at uh, properties that have gone backwards in the last 10 years in value. And you would find it more than likely in the unit market in these 5 LGAs.
Your property management business, Leafield, operates in 5 states, and I know some of your clients have units, and I also know some of your clients happen to have units in oversupplied markets. If you're a property investor who owns a unit in an oversupplied market where tenants have lots of options, how can you differentiate your unit from the many other similar homes?
Depending on the age, so if it's an older unit, then it's going to come down to how recently it's been renovated. And it might be just something simple like a coat of paint and new carpet. But if the property's starting to get um, a fair bit older, then things like new bathrooms, new kitchens, as well as paint and carpet, they're all the things that going to differentiate it. And we're talking about things other than price, I assume, Nick, because when you're in a large building or in an area with a lot of units on the market, or in that case, a lot of any comparable properties on the market for lease, the number one factor that will get your property leased before anyone else is always price. And we see it time and time again, where we try to offer any kind of incentives like a week free, or we even had someone offer a Uber Eats voucher to try and get a tenant quicker with the rent at a higher price than some other comparable properties. But at the end of the day, it's if you've got a nice, clean, renovated apartment, and you're at a competitive price, then you're going to get your property leased before others. And to give people an idea, so that when they're looking out there for a property for lease, so talking to renters here and talking to property owners as well, investors, if they want to know why their property is sitting there vacant and not leased, and their property manager isn't really giving them the real reason, get onto the listing portals and have a look at how many comparable properties are on the market in that suburb. And if you find that you've got more than 20 comparable properties in that suburb on the market for lease, and then you are competing in a oversupplied market. And if you're not near the cheapest property on the market, then you could be sitting there for weeks, sometimes months, before you get leased.
In that case, you need to start offering some Uber Eats vouchers, or maybe in the current day and age, some petrol vouchers.
Yes, I think petrol vouchers might actually be a good one there. But at the end of the day, people are scanning through the listings, looking at price. If and they will shortlist the cheapest ones first. And as long as your property is, is reasonable in terms of the condition of the property, then there's no reason why they won't lease yours first if you're the cheapest in the suburb.
I love getting your insights. This is why you earn the big bucks. Thank you as always, Owen. I will see you next week. I will still be in Perth next week. Looking forward to our chat.
Fantastic. We'll see you then, Nick.